and this panel specifically is, which is a lot of acronyms up there, is about how people are using data, or just in general their processes to bring digital marketing specifically to generating marketing qualified leads, developing those into sales qualified leads, and generally getting deeply involved in the pipeline development process, which is, I think in our experience, one of the areas where everyone says they're doing it, and then when we start digging in, it is, some things are very limited. So we have the practitioners up here are doing this at a fairly advanced level, but they have been through the journey to get there. So I'm really thankful to each of you for coming today. So Mariette, I'm going to start with you. I wanted to get about the process about moving from a simple to a more complex setup, right? As we've talked, you've made some changes and why you made them, moving from a simple marketing setup into something more complex, and the difficulties and benefits you've seen from making that jump, and a little bit about the data that you found along the way. And Mariette came extremely well prepared, and so I'm going to click over to a slide.
So I wanted to share with you my journey around MQL SQL. And the slide, as you see here, is around the 9 conversations. ServiceNow is a software automation company, and we started in the ITSM space, the IT service management. So when I joined 3 years ago, it was pretty clear we had net new versus customers. So I was responsible for net new business. So I built a whole welcome nurture track for the IT manager and above to tell them about ITSM. But 6 months ago, we started with 9 extra conversations. So we have a platform, and on the platform you can build different applications. And now from sales and marketing leadership, we have all these great new content. We split into business units, and we have all these targets per product. I was like, great, but I only have 1 nurture. So I had to build more nurtures, which is not as complicated. Of course, you build streams, you build emails. We have MarketOne as an AZ to help us out. But then we're starting to look at the audiences, and often it was the same person, because the IT manager and above might be interested in many different of our products portfolio. Plus, we have new audiences. Customer service management, HR is a totally different audience. So that was the first time that we had to look at, okay, we're going to go for job titles, but then we have the same person in multiple streams. So we really started to look at the behavior of people. We started to page tag our website, which is of course brand new because also the website started to add all the conversations. We started to look at different content, what did people download, and that's how we're trying to get people into the right nurture track. The next step is to also add more of a welcome email and more loops that people can go to the other nurture in case that's more of their interest. And the challenge, as we always have in EMEA, is we're trying to do this in 4 languages. So I cannot say I've finished my journey yet. The plan is there. We're live for 4 of these. Really using the data of behavioral to try to get people in the flow of their wishes. In H2, we're also going to add some additional telemarketing to not to sell immediately, but just to find out where people are at in their journey, so we can adjust our nurtures based on that.
Yeah, and as you look at the future for this system, or where do you feel like you're headed with it?
Well, if you go to the next slide, second slide. So one of the things we noticed, if you look at the future, also specifically of the topic of SQL, we saw the conversion rates were the highest for webinars and seminars, and also in working together with sales, you see those are the leads that make them most happy. It's not the online syndication, it's not the downloads, it's really the webinars. So what we're planning on doing with these nurtures is letting people score based on their clicks. And if they have a good scoring, put them in the engagement track where we send them invitations for webinar and seminars. The good thing about that is that I can keep them in our Eloquest system. They don't not have to go to our CRM yet. So I can ask for less information. Right now we have very long forms on the website, high bounce rates, but now we're going to move to smaller forms. And then once people are interested in a webinar or seminar, that's when we get the form you see here. We're going to have 3 types of forms. One is the long form if we really don't have a lot of information. The other one is If people, for instance, we still have some bot data or data that we're not sure where it was coming from certain events, that they can check their data, or if they're already active for a longer time in our database, they get a really simple form. So that's what we're now building out for the next phase.
I guess as you looked at this, what are it's quite a journey to get to a very sophisticated system like that. What were some of the things that the most prominent learnings, either good or bad, that you'd want to share?
I think one of the things for me is how hard it is to find your time for reporting. Right, you're building so fast that you're so focused on getting things out there. As soon as you then have questions about which email is performing best and stuff, I really have to dig into that and find it out. So that's also the feedback towards the agency. Okay, how can we improve that part of the journey? So we started to have a little bit of A/B testing. But when you're so much in a building mode, it's really hard to focus on the reporting as well. Yeah. I think that's my biggest
it's an interesting point there, because I think marketers are a pretty instinctive group, right? They think like, well, this is probably going to work. Did you find that any of the reporting you did turned out very differently than you expected? Did in general, as you did the reporting, was it just like, hey, I need to do this to prove things to my boss that this is working?
No, I think it's very insightful. Certain emails or even topics that I thought were very, very interesting and easy to read, and we saw very little engagement with those. So now working with the campaigns team to really change the topics and the headlines and all that.
Right.
So I think reports are always very insightful. Yeah, and I don't think we're moving in that direction.
I'll cancel my instinctive point then, because I would have thought you'd be like, oh yeah, I knew exactly what's going to happen.
No.
So about the data that you've used in this path, like you get these paths set up, and you have to choose what data you're going to put into it. Can you tell us a little bit about the decisions or the thoughts, how you made the choice about what went through the system?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of work with what you have. Mm-hmm. Right now, they have certain tools like priority engine, like social media, online syndication, so events. So data-wise, you work with what you have, but then it's how you look at the data and how you're going to make sure they go into the right tracks.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so, we'll come back to Mariette as we go here, right? So Alan, we've been working with you across two different companies, right? And you've had both companies, focused on this sort of issue around how do we develop pipeline here, right? And specifically, I think we want to start off with the sort of journey you've made around content, right? And what were the things that you learned that worked and didn't, and I think as we've talked about this in the past, the learnings are a bit unconventional, not what you'd expect. So tell us a little bit about the journey you've been on, and specifically in your thoughts in that area.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is actually we're not the size of Service One. So put this into some kind of context of our size. We would love to get where you are, but we know reality, our budgets are never going to allow that to happen for us. So, but the principles of what we want to apply are relatively similar. So I think part of our learning process is actually we would like to achieve the same kind of things, but our budget's never going to allow that for us to happen. So don't think you can't achieve this stuff without massive budgets to do it. It's just a different way of approaching it. So I think some kind of context for you, where we're part way through a process of going to an ABM strategy. We know we're on that journey. We know we're probably 2 years off that journey, but we know we want to get to. So I think having a clear view of actually where your end goal is really, really important. And if I look back at my current employer and my previous employer as well, which was a systems integrator in the UK, and currently we're a systems architect for Oracle technology, I think one of the key things for us is actually underlying all of this process is content. If you haven't got the right content at the right point, your processes and your marketing campaigns will fall flat on their face. It's as simple as that. So content is really important. So in both organisations when I've joined, that's what I've focused on. So is getting the content in place. The rest of the stuff can come later, almost, but that's where you need to start. But also in terms of the content, what we do is we with our sales director have broken the sales cycle into 6 very key different stages. and making sure we have the right content, but also the right marketing and sales strategy across those key 6 stages, right the way from the kind of the tech target conversation and touch point, right the way through to helping our inside sales, our field sales, helping them close the sale, to cross-sell, upsell, but actually making that client referenceable. And that's not just about content, it's about having a multi-touch marketing strategy. Now, you don't need an automation tool to do that. It helps, but you don't need it, is what I'm trying to say. And so don't be put off the fact that you might not have the budgets to have all these things, but you can still do it. It's a lot harder, but you can still do it. And I think the second point that I've learned is actually you've got to bring your salespeople on this journey with you. And people in this room might balk at me by saying this, but actually with sales and marketing, don't forget the sales bit about your job role. You know, everyone actually is in sales. Most of your people in your organisations should be in sales. And I think you have to have that hat on as well, that actually it's myself and our sales director that own that buying cycle. It's not the individual in our inside sales teams, our field sales teams. They own part of that journey. It's myself and our sales VP of sales who own that holistic journey. So therefore, we're the ones responsible to put those in place. And we have to think about the individuals, or those sales individuals along that journey, and educate them along this path. And if we don't educate them, they're not going to understand what we're trying to achieve. And that's pretty key, because this process we have to go through is only as strong as its weakest link. And I think that's what we have to remember. Actually, we're in sales as well. Yeah.
I think when we're talking about the content journey in the past, you raised a few points about how, you know, you came into one organization, one of it was a little bit too PR focused, and then you know another one to get much more specific. Sure. Can you talk a little bit about the decisions and, like, you know, get into some of the details on that?
Yeah. So in terms of actually the content we go down. So what I do is I clearly break the content strategy down into each one of those buying cycles. Yeah. I break it down into kind of personas, so who we're targeting. What I then also do is I think the buying cycle has completely changed over the last 2-3 years. We're not just talking to technologists anymore. We're talking to business owners. So we have to talk about the business outcomes for those people. So first and foremost, when I joined Cintra, which was about 18 months to 2 years ago, is I defined what we do as an organisation. So I broke down a Maslow hierarchy of needs. So, what technology stack do we operate in? What do we do in it? What do we add as value? What makes us differentiate from our competitors? But then also, what are the pain points for our clients they're trying to solve? And by looking at that messaging hierarchy, I then apply that across all of the 6 key different stages. I then personalise that against personas and job titles. And then also, on top of that, what I also do is I look at what's the technology pain point, what's the business pain point, what's the technology pain point, and where's the peer reference. And I make sure that hierarchy and those 3 areas are addressed at each stage of a buying cycle in terms of a content development program. And once you've got that in place, it helps enormously with your content syndication program via Tech Target. That content can be reused across a whole lot of other different mediums and marketing strategies as well.
And I guess the last follow-up on that was that you had talked about, not just about getting the content out there for response, but also paying attention to what converted in a certain way and what types of content, that really, went into the sales cycle in a certain way. What did you learn about that?
I'll put my hands on the air up in the end and say we failed at it. We got it wrong at one point. So. When I was in my last company, it was a company called EMEA, we actually managed to do it relatively successfully because we were technology agnostic in terms of what we were doing, because we were a systems integrator. So therefore, we could talk about cloud quite effectively. We didn't really care who the cloud provider was or the MDM specialist or all that kind of stuff, because we were agnostic. So we could have very open conversations about technology. What was very different, what the problem at IPL was actually our salespeople weren't engaged in the process. So therefore, we got a huge amount of leads in. We developed a pipeline we identified a pipe at a quarter of the data, about $3 million, but it wasn't followed up because we didn't have an inside sales function. So that's where we failed at IPL. In Cintra, kind of when we first. Slightly naive thought, we can just talk about cloud and it's great, but actually we had to put it into context of an Oracle cloud story. So in our first foray into this, we talked about cloud, how fantastic it was. In the right context, it was fantastic content, SQL outside of our Oracle environment, it wasn't, and it was too generic. So we picked it up relatively quickly, and we changed the content strategy accordingly. So those are the things I think kind of being small and agile is the approach that you have to take with your content and make it relevant to your audience.
Yeah, I think that's super relevant because on some level it's a lot of content, but the other is that it doesn't work always the first time, and iteration is key, but also making sure that you're sharing that with all of those other parties, that we may not get this right exactly the first time, and we have to hear from sales, from outside experts, from writers about what really works. So I think that's an important lesson then. So I'm going to switch over to Fran at Dine, and I think it's interesting always to talk about what is your process for marketing automation, but in particular as we've worked with Dine, I've been struck about the focus on metrics but sensible metrics, and specifically about the metrics in your MQL and SQL that have to do with the relationships you have with other parts of your organization, and how that becomes a way of not I hit my number, but in a way of communication. I thought that was a really thoughtful way that you've gone about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the key things is really seeing improvement across the whole organisation, similar to Alan as well. We are also sales and marketing. We're not just marketing. We work very closely with our LDR team, and our LDR team use the BANT approach to qualifying all their opportunities, and we really need to have an understanding of what's working and what isn't. And if it's not working, then marketing need to know about that to really understand what we can do at the front end. I think also what we brought forward within our EMEA team is looking at the pipeline velocity innovation. And what that really means is really looking at all the opportunities through the sales pipeline, not just looking at it from the opportunity perspective, but also looking at it at, a close one perspective as well. I just made a few points here, notes here, that we see majority of our leads deals close within 45 to a 60-day period. So if we see those opportunities aging, it's really working with the sales management to understand what to do with them. Why are they sitting in our pipeline and aging, and they're not going anywhere and they're getting stuck? It's also for the sales management team to really use that within their one-to-ones with their sales reps, and to making sure that we're pushing through the funnel. I think that's really key, is the funnel, and making sure that each opportunity is moving through the stages, very similar to Alan, and all working together, really. My last point really is looking at marketing opportunities that are really languishing at the top of the funnel. We have an SLA that every single lead needs to be touched within 48 hours of going into the LDR's team, and that's really important because they've got to stay warm. I mean, you mentioned earlier that we can have thousands and thousands of leads, but they're not being touched, and they're expensive. Everyone in marketing knows that they're vitally important. So if they're not touched within 48 hours, then we make sure that they're either working them or they're recycling them and putting them through our marketing automation.
I think some of the things as we talk to other customers that are underlined that I think are good, and a way of framing this is that a lot of times we get these marketers that almost live in fear of the metrics they have around pipeline development, and I have to hit this pipeline number. And I think that one of the things I think the Dine experience is good with is that it's talking about how do we use this as a communication strategy across these things. Are we doing the job with each other? And a way of we're going to fix this, right? And that sort of spirit is something that I think you've worked hard at actually creating there, right? And it's kind of a nuance about what are the metrics for. So tell me a little bit about what the data or insight that you see is most important to making this program work and hitting the metrics over time. What a mixture of data stroke insight. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably mentioned this 3 times already, but it's really bridging that sales and marketing divide and making sure we have a close relationship with our LDR team and the manager of the LDR team. We know that we typically want to see around 50 calls to 30 emails sent per day. So, it's just making that we're keeping on top of that, regular syncing with regular reporting. We also want to really keep aligned with the working queues as well. So we have an SLA that we make sure that all the working queues, we have only up to 150 leads in that working queue. That's, if it becomes unmanageable, then I need to work with the LDR team and we need to establish a process that will work, because we all know that if it gets beyond 150, then it is completely unmanageable to work with. I think lastly, what we want to see is success. I think for marketing, we tend to sit there and we make everything look nice and everything look fluffy, and we create great content and do great events. But for me personally, I really actually do want to see success. So I think making sure that we are seeing a 20% lead to opportunity and hopefully a target of 25% from opportunity to close one. So working with that sales management team and working with those LDR teams to making sure that we achieve those metrics.
Great. So Alex, I'm going to take it over to you, which is that we've talked a lot about email as part of this. But the Schneider approach, it includes email for sure, but goes beyond that. I wanted to, I think it's a kind of a broad-minded nurturing effort. I'd consider it there. So I think it'd be useful for you to talk a little bit about, how you take data and signal about prospects and think about it, beyond your own website, and a little bit about that.
Sure. So I think for us, we have been doing lead generation for a really, really long time. So that's always been a backbone of everything we've been doing for IT marketing. And basically what happened to us then was that we got introduced to marketing automation software. And so what historically we would be doing is we would generate leads by white paper downloads, we'd get the names, we'd upload them. And all of a sudden we had this marketing automation, and all of a sudden it wasn't a lead, but it was just an engaged user. So we were confronted by engagement scores, and in order to pass on to sales, we had to hit 100. And that didn't happen for most of our leads, really. So unfortunately, what happened was we got a lot of names into that system, and they really just stayed in there because there wasn't a very detailed email program to catch up on those people, to nurture those people. And so what we did was to say, wait a second, we do have a lot of really, really big programmatic advertising programs that we do. So we have invested heavily in running programmatic campaigns, especially in the UK, where it's a fixed stable at this point to do campaigns, which give us a lot of data insights from our customers from a very valuable source, which would be our website in this case. And so what we decided to do is to take those people into the marketing automation and then take them out again and start nurturing them via our programmatic efforts that, it's display, it's content, it's social, it's everything. So we started building up customer journeys, customer paths to nurture those people with advertising, basically, so display advertising. So we have a couple of touch points that we thought would be relevant for us to see, where's a customer going on our site? What does this mean with relation to what we saw that person did, for example, in Priority Engine? And so that way we basically nurture those people up to 100, hopefully. So we're seeing success there, that it's working for us, and then we can hand them over to sales. So that's how we really try to get to different elements of data together. So all of the great insights we get from TechTarget, for example, plus actions on our own inventory. And that's what I heard a lot now in this round. Actually, there's a lot of touch points that work for us as well. There's content, it's not exactly finished yet, and somewhere in between there, that's us. So we're organizing our content basically around those customers.
Yeah, I think the couple things you said is trying to draw conclusions and take actions based on different signals than you have just before. I mean, lead gen used to be it, right?
Yeah.
If you download the asset, that was it. And I think any of us are taking away that's still a foundational element of it. But there are other sources of quality signal which are worth taking an action on.
Correct, yes. And I think for us, it's always been, well, I shouldn't say us, it's really for me. What I was always missing from lead gen was intent, really. So obviously I can do an ABM campaign, I can get people to download my white paper, but at the end of the day, it's really a person from a company I know has downloaded my white paper, but I don't know what the purpose of it is. Why have, it might as well be that people download white papers because they have to write a white paper themselves, those kinds of things. And so by adding this additional funnel to the whole thing, we can get them to a blog, we can get them to a webinar, whatever it is, we can measure those things out with those programmatic campaigns, we can see engagement, and then we can see, this is a good one that's ready to pass on to sales, that's one that needs probably a couple more rounds of nurturing, and it's really helpful for us, I think, in that sense, to get a clearer picture of the customer at the end of the day.
So I'm going to, if anyone has questions, think of them now, and I'm going to ask one question, and then you'll be ready. So I guess you raised this, and this is to everyone on the panel, or whoever would like to talk about this idea of, so we have talked about people taking actions, but then this other idea of intent, of trying to understand an account or an individual level what's really going on, and what are the things that each of you are trying to aggregate and present to other people outside of marketing to give a better picture of that. What's working now, or what's on your roadmap. I mean, because it isn't. Hopefully, it's not just like this guy clicked on this, right? Tell me about how you all are thinking or evolving that, and maybe we'll work back from Mariette, down, or whoever would like to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things we're implementing is updating our scoring matrices, and to make it simple, we're going to use stars. So that's one way of which account is most urgent. SLAs will be different depending on stars. And one of the things we're adding there is that you get more points if you're from a certain account that's on our account list, because that's something we notice with also in our inside sales team really has a focused set of accounts. So that's one way. And then giving more insight by showing the journey of the person in our CRM system as well. So you can see which pages they visited and that kind of things. So that's on the roadmap for now.
Well, I think we're just on a completely different part of our journey because, I've only been with the organisation for about just over 18 months. So I guess I'm at the stage where I'm at a greenfield site. So the world is my oyster almost. And I'm very fortunate. The CRM system that we have currently is probably one of the best CRM systems in terms of data quality I've ever worked on, which is always a big plus. So that kind of helps. The process that we've gone through, we've built the business case for in terms of actually the business processes we want to kind of achieve. So we've got the strategy in place, and it's now that we're looking at the automation tools. So we know the intelligence is in our CRM systems. We just don't have easy access to it. So we're going through the process currently of reviewing the market for automation programs, but also we've got an eye on the future as well. So to having an eye on all the different touch points that people go through the program, because we know we've done it. If you look at an individual account, we can see it, but we just can't see it at a global level. So we know that there's an issue there, but we know we've got it's a nice problem to have. So it's actually a relatively easy problem to solve, and we know how to solve it. But also we want to kind of make our program and our strategy have longevity as well. So we also kind of, whilst we're implementing an automation tool at the moment, we're going through that process. What we're also looking at is account-based marketing. So actually, when we've got the intelligence, is actually kind of the tools that are out in the marketplace. So we're talking to digital advertisers and things like that about how you can direct things, because we want to make sure that actually the tools we're deploying currently can actually handle these things for when we're 12 months, 18 months out as well. So we can do proper account-based marketing properly. So that's...
Well, I think for us, a lot has to do with change management. I think that's really, one of the key things that we have to look into. So obviously we try to build, at the end of the day, it should be a fully automated system where on the one hand I have something like TechTarget plugging into Marketo in this case, and on the other hand I have my programmatic vendors taking that data out. But I think the process to really get sales, on the one hand I think understand it, because it is some of that marketing fluff which I think was mentioned at some point in this round, to really understand, we're not spamming you, or we're trying not to spam you with half-baked names, but we're really trying to nurture them before we give them to you, and really get everyone who's involved, a lot of teams, a lot of people involved, be part of that change management really, and lead that from our perspective. So the one part is technical, the other part I think is change management more than anything else.